A common engine performance control used on today's vehicles is a ported vacuum switch, PVS, or thermal vacuum switch, often referred to as TVS. Ported vacuum or thermal vacuum switches are located in the vehicle's cooling system and can commonly be found in the radiator, the intake manifold, or on the thermostat housing. Their duty is to supply or block vacuum to a certain component as the engine coolant reaches a preset temperature. Thermal vacuum switches have been used on vehicles since the early 60s to control items like distributor vacuum advances, the EGR system, heated air intake systems, and canister purge operation, just to name a few. Symptoms of a failing thermal vacuum switch can include poor performance or economy, surging while highway driving, engine knock or detonation, rough idle, and a stumble or hesitation on acceleration. The first step for testing a thermal vacuum switch is to perform a visual inspection. Look for cracked or broken vacuum ports, which often happen because the plastic upper body portion of the switch has become brittle. This is caused by the continuous hot and cold cycling experienced during normal engine operation. Testing a thermal vacuum switch can be performed on or off the vehicle. To test the switch on the vehicle, you will need a hand vacuum pump and a vacuum gauge. With the engine cold, remove the vacuum supply line from the switch, plug it, and in its place, connect the hose from the hand vacuum pump. Remove one of the other vacuum lines on the switch, and in its place, connect a vacuum gauge. Apply 20 inches of vacuum. If the switch is normally closed when it is cold, start the engine. As the engine warms up, the switch should purge vacuum from the hand vacuum pump and transfer it to the vacuum gauge. If the switch doesn't originally hold vacuum, it may be defective or it is normally open when it is cold. If it's normally open cold, then it should not allow the passage of vacuum after the engine is fully warm. In either case, you should be able to notice a change in operation from when the switch is cold to when it is hot. If it never holds vacuum, doesn't transfer vacuum as the engine warms up, or both gauges remain at the same reading all the time, replace the switch. Testing it off from the vehicle can be performed in the same manner by using a cigarette lighter to warm the capsule on the sensor. Once again, the switch should either transfer or block the vacuum from the hand pump as the tip of the switch is heated up. Replacing a thermal vacuum switch only requires a few simple hand tools. They include the correct size wrench for removal of the old switch, a drain pan, some Teflon thread sealing tape, and the correct replacement switch for your vehicle. First, begin all repairs with a cool engine. Then place a pan under the radiator and drain a sufficient amount of coolant from the radiator to prevent spillage when removing the switch from the cooling system. Remove any brackets or fan shrouds as needed to access the switch. Then, disconnect the vacuum hose connection or connections from the switch. You may wish to label the hose locations to be sure of correct positioning on the new switch. With the correct size wrench or socket, loosen and remove the switch. Excessive scale and corrosion buildup on the bottom of the sensor can act as an insulator, causing the switch to send a late or no signal. To help prevent scaling and deposits on sensors or switches, we suggest a complete flush and refill of the cooling system every 2 years. Compare the old and new switches to ensure proper replacement. Place a small dab of pipe sealant or Teflon thread sealing tape on the threads of the new switch. To prevent cross-threading, begin by installing the new switch by hand. Do not, however, apply pressure on the vacuum ports of the switch, as permanent damage may occur. Carefully tighten the new switch with the proper size wrench. Reconnect any vacuum hose connections. Reinstall any brackets or the fan shroud if removed. Refill the cooling system with the antifreeze removed earlier, and you're done.
Let's briefly recap the steps involved for testing and replacing a ported thermal vacuum switch. First, perform a visual inspection. Look for cracked or broken vacuum ports. To test the switch on the vehicle, connect a hand vacuum pump to the vacuum source port on the switch and connect a vacuum gauge to one of the other ports on the switch. Apply 20 inches of vacuum to the switch. Now start the engine. If it is a normally closed cold switch, the switch should transfer vacuum from the hand pump to the vacuum gauge when the engine warms up. If it is a normally open cold switch, it should stop the flow of vacuum once the engine is warm. In either case, there should be a change in the operation of the switch from when it is cold to when it is hot. If it never changes, replace the switch. Whenever working under the hood, always begin repairs with a cool engine. Drain the coolant from the radiator into a clean drain pan. Disconnect the vacuum hose connections from the switch. Label their locations to ensure proper reconnection. With the correct size wrench, remove the switch. Compare the new and old switches to be sure of proper replacement. Place a small dab of pipe sealant on the threads and reinsert the new switch by starting it in the threads by hand. Carefully tighten the new switch. Reconnect any vacuum hoses removed earlier. Lastly, refill the cooling system with the antifreeze earlier removed.